Welcome back. This is another exciting episode of Mr. Takeda Teaches Algebra. I'm your host, Mr. Takeda, and I'm going to teach you some algebra right now. This video is new for 2019, believe it or not. I'm recording this in January of 2019, and we're going to start Chapter 7 here with Lesson 7.1 on adding and subtracting polynomials. So you might be asking yourself, what's a polynomial? Well, that's a good question. We're going to get right into some vocabulary. I'm going to warn you up front. A lot of vocabulary to get in your notes. So don't try to rush through this. There's a lot of vocabulary to get in your notes. The first word is monomial. A monomial can be a number. It can be a variable or a product of numbers and variables. So a number like 7, that's a monomial. A variable like x, that's also a monomial, and a product of numbers and variables, so 7x or 7xy. Any of these things will be considered monomials. Next, we have the term, the degree of a monomial. It's the sum of the exponents of the variables. So, for instance, in 5x squared, I've only got one variable. It has an exponent of 2, so this is a second degree. In example B, negative 1/2 xy cubed. Well, the x is a variable, and it has an exponent. We don't see it, but it really has an exponent of 1. So the sum here is 4. This is actually a fourth degree monomial. For letter C, 8x cubed, y cubed, two variables, x and y, two exponents, 3 and 3. So this will be a sixth degree. The last one is a constant. A constant, we say, has a degree of 0 because it has no variable. Okay, so if you need to pause this screen and get this into your notes, do that now. And when you're ready, go ahead and hit resume, and I'll join you on the next page. More vocabulary. To classify polynomials, we've got 3 terms that have to do with the number of terms in a polynomial. And actually, the first one's kind of general. Polynomial, poly, of course, the prefix means many. So in this case, we use the term polynomial to represent any monomial. It could be a monomial by itself or the sum of monomials. So any number of monomials added together is considered a polynomial. If we have a polynomial, a specific polynomial with only 2 terms in it, we call that a binomial. Of course, we are familiar with the prefix bi, as like in bicycles or bifocal, something like that. And a trinomial would have 3 terms. The prefix tri, like in tricycle or something like that. So those are some specific terms having to do with the number of terms in a polynomial. Okay, so if you need to pause the video again, pause it now. Get these in your notes. There's a lot of vocabulary in the first lesson here of this section. More vocabulary. Yes, there's lots of writing. Degree of polynomial, the greatest degree of its terms. So, for example, if I had 7x plus 3x squared plus 2, well, this would have this monomial, the 7x, would have a degree of 1. The middle term, 3x squared, has a degree of 2, and the constant 2 here has a degree of 0. So the greatest degree here is the 2. So the degree of the polynomial in this case is 2. The greatest degree of its terms. Okay? Standard form, when degrees of the terms decrease from left to right. So looking at the first example, 7x plus 3x squared plus 2, if I was to write this in standard term, the greatest degree would go first. So 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. Another way you can think of this is x squared x to the first. And this is actually 2 times what? X to the 0. That's why we call that a 0 degree. Constants have a degree of 0. Lastly on this page, the leading coefficient. It's the coefficient of the leading term. So in our example, 3x squared plus 7x plus 2, the leading term, when the polynomial is in standard form, whichever coefficient is first, that is the leading coefficient. In this case, the 3. If you need to pause this to get this into your notes, do so now, and I'll meet you on the next screen. So writing a polynomial in standard form, I did that example on the previous screen, but let's take a look at this one here. 15x minus x cubed plus 3. Now, let's talk about terms. Let's talk about that definition. Polynomials are monomials that are added together. So you really need to think of 15x minus x cubed as 15x plus negative x cubed, right? Plus 3 plus negative x cubed. Let's put this in standard form. So which one goes first? The negative x cubed. That sign goes with the term. We're going to call this whole thing here a term. Sometimes we'll use the words term and monomial interchangeably. Then the 15x. Then the 3. Okay, so there's in standard form. Degree, this is a third degree polynomial, and the leading coefficient here is actually what? -1. All right, so always remember those remarkable invisible numbers, invisible ones and zeros. You need to pause this to get this in your notes. Do so now. Otherwise, I'm going to move to the next screen and join me there. More vocabulary. Lots here. So by degree, if we have a first degree polynomial, we call that linear. We've already worked with linear functions. Well, in this case, if it's a first degree, so if you think about what we've been doing with like things like 5x minus 2. If this was a function, if this was an equation, that would be a linear function. So we consider this type of polynomial linear. Quadratic, if it's second degree, so that would be something like 5x squared plus x minus 2. This is a degree of 2. We call that quadratic. Now, don't confuse this with fourth degree. Fourth degree is quartic, so that would be something like 5x to the fourth. And then cubic would be like 5x to the third. And the degree of the polynomial is that 1, 2, 3, and 4. Number of terms, we've already written these down, so you don't have to write these down again. So just looking at these examples here, or the first couple, this first example I have right here, this would be a first degree binomial. First degree binomial. The second example I have here would be a second degree or quadratic trinomial. A quadratic trinomial. So get these other terms in here. These are classification by degree. And then if you need to pause this here, do so now, and I'll meet you on the next page. But remember, I'm not writing everything down I'm saying. So make sure you get everything down in your notes that you'll need to use on your quiz. Classifying polynomial. This goes fairly quickly here. Write each polynomial in standard form. Identify the degree and classify each polynomial by the number of terms. First one. It's already in standard form, so this is what? A fourth degree or a quartic monomial. Second example, 5x squared goes first, and then the negative x, then the plus 4. This is a quadratic or second degree trinomial. And the last example, q to the fifth goes first, and then the 8q. We're just going to call this a fifth degree binomial. Okay, so you're going to be responsible for knowing all these terms and how to use those terms to classify polynomials. Let's move on to the heart of this video here, and what we're going to do here is add polynomials, find the sum. I have two trinomials I'm adding together here: 2x cubed minus 5x squared plus x. I'm adding that to 2x squared plus x cubed minus 1. Well, when it comes to adding polynomials, you can essentially ignore the parentheses. Ignore the parentheses. Are you writing that down? Ignore the parentheses and just combine like terms. So I have my x cubes, 2x cubed and 1x cubed. That gives me 3x cubed. I've got my x squares, negative 5x squared and 2x squared. If I combine those, I get negative 3x squared. So those are my x squares. Now my x's, I only got one of them. This one has one, this one doesn't. So that'll go next. I'm going in descending order. I'm going in standard form. And then finally the constant of minus 1. Negative 1 will go last. The second example, I've got 3x squared plus x minus 6 plus x squared plus 4x plus 10. 3x squared and x squared would be 4x squared. Then x and 4x would be 5x. And then negative 6 plus 10 would be 4. That's pretty straightforward. But let's talk about subtracting. Just like when we do integers, we want to think of adding the opposite. So the first polynomial stays the same. The second one, the operation then becomes addition. We're going to add the opposite. So what's the opposite of negative 2n squared? That's positive 2n squared. The opposite of 2n would be negative 2n. And the opposite of negative 4 would be positive 4. Okay? We're going to add the opposite. So 4n squared plus 2n squared, 6n squared. Now there's no n over here, but this one has an n term, so negative 2n is minus 2n. And then I've got 5 plus 4, and that's going to be 9. So that one is done just like that. The last one, again, the first polynomial stays the same. We think of subtraction as addition, and then we write the opposite of everything in the second polynomial. So 4x squared and negative 3x squared, 1x squared. Negative 3x plus 1x, negative 2x. And then finally 5 plus 8 is 13. Okay, add the opposite, just like when we're doing integers. And if you need to pause it to get these into your notes, do so. But otherwise, if not, I am done. That's Black Widow from the comics. Black Widow from the comics. So thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in class next time. Bye-bye.